in just a moment to begin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya b'dvaro. Okay, and we will begin with the blessing of a reading of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Zaman has a question. Go ahead.
Can you ride in a car on Shabbos if I don't have a driving it?
That is a very good question. Zaman wants to know, can you ride in a car on Shabbos if a Gentile is driving it? So remember we were talking about relatively, right? So if a person is driving a car, it's better if they're driving in a car that a Gentile is driving than if they're driving in a car that they are driving.
Well, you can have a Gentile come to your house and turn on the lights, all that, right?
So it's very complicated the way
driving on Shabbos is forbidden.
Driving on Shabbos is forbidden.
You're not riding.
If you're part of that, you could skirt the issue, but the bottom line is you're not supposed to do it. I know I'm a conservative, so I do drive on Shabbos.
Okay, but you can have, but Orthodox can have Shabbos boys come into the house and turn on the light and stuff.
So it's a good question. The answer is that it's very, very complicated, the laws of the Shabbos goy. In other words, you can't tell someone, come and turn the air conditioner on. But if they figure it out on their own, they're allowed to do it. So many people stumble in this because it's very fine, and I can tell you myself, I've made mistakes in this. Because you call your neighbor and say, it's so hot in my house. And then you go outside and you wait for a neighbor to come. And when it's Shabbos and it's 11 o'clock at night and you live in a community where there's not really people walking their dogs, sometimes it's very hard to find someone. Here you go by the corner. It's like, the guy comes, and I'm sure that every Jewish comedian has a thing on this, right? The guy comes in and is like, oh boy, it's hot in my house. Okay, well, isn't it a nice breeze out here? That's why you're walking out. He's like, no. You want to come inside my house? Like, you just told me it's hot in there. Why would I want to go in? Oh, because if you go in and you're hot, then there might be something you can do about that, right? But even that already is like the hinting has to be very subtle. But in answer to the question, if somebody is going to be driving somewhere to take an Uber or to have someone not Jewish drive, would be better than to have a Jewish person drive. Like the famous story of the taxi driver. This Jewish lady is going into labor on Shabbos. She needs to call a taxi to get to the hospital. So they call the dispatch for the taxi, and they say, just make sure it's not a Jewish driver. So anyways, she and her husband, they're in the taxi. I guess this was their first kid. She and her husband are in the taxi, and they're going, and they start going towards the hospital, and they hear over the radio the dispatcher ask the cabbie. He says, "Did you pick up that anti-Semite yet?" Anyway, so I wanted to start with a.
Yes or no?
She is first.
Is it a yes or a no? The answer is no, but it's better than driving yourself. In other words, someone told me that he has a girlfriend and she's interested in converting, and they want to come to shul. So they want to know, is she welcome here? They said they can come, but she should be driving. It is forbidden to drive on Shabbos. Absolutely forbidden to drive on Shabbos.
Right.
So I like what Mitch said. Mitch said, I'm not yet there. I drive on Shabbos, but I know it's forbidden. So yeah, that's the answer.
I'm not being disrespectful. But I can't walk a mile and a half. The synagogue is too much for me, and I'd rather dominate the community.
All right. So these questions are very individual and very specific for each person.
And when they made that rule, everyone lived in a shtetl, everything was a walk distance. They didn't anticipate the United States, whereas the 10
God
miles,
didn't anticipate.
the rabbis didn't.
God's the one who said you can't turn on a fire.
But it's the rabbis that said you can't fry Bible.
It was
A horse.
donkey.
A horse.
Yeah.
Correct.
Really?
Anyways,
I don't
then
know.
we're gonna get off topic over here. So I want to bring us back into the
Okay.
conversation with one of my favorite jobs. There's a lot of favorites today. There are 3 things that will change you, have an effect on you, and if they don't have an effect on you, that means you haven't had enough. Learning Torah will make you a mensch, and if you're not yet a mensch, you didn't learn enough Torah. Drinking vodka will make you drunk. And if you're not yet drunk, you didn't drink enough vodka. Money will make you crazy. And if you're not yet crazy, you don't have enough money.
A little Meshuggah.
Right?
Or
What do they
make
say?
misery a lot more fun.
Exactly. What do they say? Money can't buy happiness, but I'd rather cry in a Lamborghini.
Right, yeah. Neither can poverty.
Sorry?
Money can't buy happiness, but neither can poverty.
I like that. I like that. Oh, I'm going to use that. That is a good one. Okay. So the first fundraising campaign. Right after God gives the Jewish people the Torah. So this is after Moses comes down the second time, right? So God, the timeline here is that the Jewish people receive the Torah on the 6th day of Sivan. They hear the 10 commandments from God. There was no tablets yet. There was 10 commandments from God. Okay. The next day, God tells Moses, come up to me and I will give you, I will teach you the Torah and give you the tablets. So Moses is up there 40 days and 40 nights. And when he comes down, what does he see? A terrible calamity. The Jews have sinned with the golden calf. So Moses goes back up for another 80 days to beg forgiveness. And 40 days he's begging forgiveness. The second 40 days he's getting a new set of tablets. And then he comes down. A big part of the atonement process is that God says, you will build for me a tabernacle and I will once again dwell among you. So, Mitch, would you like to take it away with source number 1? Here's what happened. The first fundraising campaign.
Fundraising campaign. God spoke to Moses saying, speak to the children of Israel and have them bring me a gift. From every person whose heart moves them, you shall collect my gift. This is the offering you shall collect from them: gold, silver, and copper, sky blue, purple, and scarlet wool, fine linen and goat hair, ram skins dyed red, package skins and cedar wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and gemstones for setting, for the ephod and the breastplate. They shall make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell within them.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Now, Susan, do you have a question on this?
About what?
She had a question about something else.
Yeah, I had a question.
Oh, we'll get to
Why
that
does
one soon,
God-
but
Why does
Hmm?
God need gold and silver and stuff?
okay, that's a good question. It's a good question. I think that if your question isn't answered by the end of the class, please ask it again.
Okay.
But the question that I thought Susie was going to ask is, where in the world did the Jews have all this money from? Right, the Jewish people, they are, right, they're in the desert, and they're a fledgling little group of people. Well, they're a big group of people. Where did they have all the money from? So Zalman says, of course, they had it from Egypt. Take it away. Source number 2, Zalman.
One thing, they shall make for me a sanctuary. Now, I'm assuming the sanctuary is the temple. Correct?
So it was a series of different buildings until it became the temple.
Okay, but they're still in the desert.
Mhm.
Did they build something in the desert?
Yeah, they had a portable tabernacle. So if you read in this week's Torah portion, you'll see the all the different items and how they built it. Takes like 3 or 4 Torah portions to go through how the instructions for everything, and then how they made everything, and then conclusion of how they put it all together. It was a huge. It was for who they were, it was practically impossible. Meaning these was extremely tall building, and Moses was able to put it up and take it down, and it was God who lifted it up and took it down, and Moses was the crane.
God said to Moses, speak now in the ears of the people, and have each person ask their neighbor for silver and gold vessels.
So again, this was before the Jewish people left Egypt. This is before the death of the
Speak now, the word na in Hebrew denotes a request. Please inform them so that the righteous Abraham should not say that they will be enslaved and oppressed was fulfilled. But in the end of that verse, and afterward they will leave with great wealth, was not fulfilled.
Okay, so Rashi says, please, Moses was begging the Jewish people, please, please, take the gold and the silver. Why was he saying please? Because God was asking Moses to make sure that God doesn't go bad on his promise. What was the promise? Susie, would you like, Zalman, continue with us over here in Genesis 15.
God said to Abram, know that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But I will judge the nation they serve, and afterwards they will leave with great wealth.
Okay. So now we know it all started 400 years ago with a promise from God to Abraham. God promises Abraham, your children will be enslaved, and then afterwards they will leave in great wealth. Therefore, before the Jewish people left from Egypt, God begs Moses, saying, convince the Jewish people. I don't think we really need much convincing, but make sure this gets done, right? Tell the Jewish people to take the gold and the silver, etc., for all the riches of Egypt, so that they come out. And then once they're out in the desert, the Jewish people now have lots of money to build a tabernacle. The Rebbe, why great wealth? The Jewish people knew they were going into the desert where they would remain for 40 years.
But they know they were going?
That's exactly what I was wondering.
Where they were, no, that says where they were going.
That's exactly where they were going.
Wasn't the 40 years of punishment?
The 40 years
for
of
the golden
punishment
calf?
for the sin of the spies, which happened shortly after. But yes, the 40 years was a punishment. So that's a good question, and I don't know. We're going to shelf it for now, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Read.
Why then? Sorry.
Read. Why does someone with $2 billion want $4 billion?
Why then did they need?
Nature.
That's the nature, right? Why then did they need all of this silver and gold, right? But this was God. God wasn't being greedy. God was telling them that they need all the silver and gold. So why did they need this? God knew that while the Jews were in the desert, he would provide them with manna to eat, water to drink from Miriam's well, and the cloud of glory to launder their clothes. Yet despite this, he declared that he would not take them out of Egypt until they had taken with them great wealth. It could be saying that God knew. Here, okay, interesting. If you look in the Hebrew, it says, and seemingly there's a question here. Kevan sheyadu, since they knew that they are going into the desert. It doesn't say the Jewish people knew they were going into the desert. It could be talking about God. God knows that he's sending the Jewish people in the desert, and he knows that they're going to end up there for 40 years. So he also knows that he's going to be providing them with manna from heaven, water from the rock, and the clouds of glory. Yet despite this, he declared to Abraham that he wouldn't take them out of Egypt until they had taken with them great wealth. So that's a possible answer, but I don't know if it's the correct answer. Even though the Jewish people said that they were willing to forego the great wealth in order to leave Egypt quicker, they said, who cares about all the wealth? Let's just get out of here. God commanded them to borrow silver and gold vessels from the Egyptians. This was done so that the righteous one, Abraham, should not say, he fulfilled the part about enslaving and afflicting them, but he did not fulfill the part about their leaving with great wealth. The entire justification was simply so that Abraham shouldn't say that God didn't fulfill his promise. So why did God promise great wealth to Abraham in the first place, rather than just telling him that they're going to go free? Jewish identity under all circumstances. The answer is as follows. The Jewish people demonstrated that despite having lived in Egypt for 4 uninterrupted generations, they remained steadfast in their Jewish identity and did not submit to the idolatrous influences of Egypt. As the Medrash states, they did not change their names, their clothing, etc. God therefore wanted them to leave with great wealth, so that everyone should see that they are using the gold, silver, and copper to build a Mishkan, a tabernacle in the middle of the desert. The Mishkan was not built in the land of Israel. Israel was the next stage, where they built the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. The first step towards establishing a dwelling place for God was in the desert, a place inhabited only by snakes, fiery serpents, scorpions, and thirst where there is no water. This is where God brought the nation he had freed from slavery, providing them with cedar trees that Jacob had brought with him to Egypt, knowing that they would later be needed to build the Mishkan in the desert, as Rashi explains. Page number 4. He commanded them to take with them silver and gold vessels, gold, silver, and copper, and all the other materials enumerated in the Torah, to demonstrate that in the midst of a desolate wilderness filled with snakes, fiery serpents, and scorpions, the Jewish people would construct a dwelling place for God, in which he would fulfill his promise, and I will dwell among them. So parenthetically, the difference between snakes and fiery serpents. Snakes refers to constrictors, and fiery serpents refers to venomous snakes, whose venom, quote unquote, burns the flesh and disintegrates the person. Okay. So we've spoken about how they got the gold and silver was from the Egyptians. Cedar wood, typically the good cedar wood, comes from Lebanon. So where did they find this cedar wood in Egypt? Susie, would you like to read for us source number 3?
Oh, if I can find it. Okay.
Page number 4.
I can't, I had it for a minute. Maybe somebody else should read it until I find it.
Okay. Joan, do you have it, or you're together with Susie on that?
Yeah, she gave me hers, and I'm looking for it. Oh, here, wait a minute.
Oh,
Cedar wood. From
Perfect.
where did they get these materials in the desert? Rabbi Tekumba, I don't know, explained that Jacob, our forefather, foresaw with divine inspiration that the Jews would one day build a Mishkan in the desert. So he brought cedar wood to Egypt, planted them there, and instructed his children to take them along when they left Egypt.
thank you, Susie. After demonstrating that even during the 210 years of exile, they had not lost their Jewish identity, their next challenge was to build a Mishkan in the desert, a place filled with bereft of any of any positive life and filled with dangers, and to use the silver and gold that they had amassed and build a Mishkan, a tabernacle for God. So Mishkan is translated as tabernacle. The word Mishkan literally means a resting place, I believe,
Where did you say that?
if I'm not mistaken. Just to look up the etymology again.
It says minor sanctuary,
Okay.
a synagogue.
Page number 5,
Okay.
setting our priorities right. Which home should be more beautiful? Since it was necessary to build a Mishkan for God, a place about which God himself says that I will dwell within them, if the Mishkan will look just like any other structure in the world, it would indicate that people don't recognize the distinction between the two. This is similar to the difference between a person's home and the stable or barn where their animals are kept. While people generally heat their barn and provide food and drink for the animals, no one decorates it with jewelry or embellishments to make it beautiful. By contrast, a home for people needs to be a pleasant dwelling that expands one's mind, as the Talmud states. From this, it should be clear to us that when building a Mishkan or a Beit HaMikdash, or even a minor sanctuary, a synagogue, a study hall, a yeshiva, and the like, it can't just be as nice as one's private home. If a person treats a house of worship as no more important than their personal residence, it shows that they do not truly appreciate its significance for them. Its significance is not for someone else, it is for ourselves and our own children. We should want to build a beautiful synagogue not so that it should impress others, but we should build a beautiful synagogue so that it should impress ourselves and our children the importance of the place that we are attending. We need to feel and to express this sentiment in our actions, that the holiness of a synagogue and a study hall demands that we build them with gold, even if in our own homes we are content with silver or copper. When do we do this? When we do this, we have the opportunity to display in our daily lives, even while we sleep, that the highest priority in our lives is spirituality and holiness. This will be in such an open and clear way that all the peoples of the earth will see. The proof of our order of priorities is that for a holy space we use gold, while for our own homes we are satisfied with silver and copper. A home is a dwelling for people, distinct from a stable for animals, but it does not reach the level of the sanctity of a synagogue or a study hall. These places are also meant for people, but when we enter them, we are more readily able to rise above the routines of daily life and strive to be better, more spiritual, and more holy. To allow us the ability to demonstrate this recognition, God grants us gold and gives us the free will to choose how to use it. God trusts us that we will use our brains and understand that gold is meant for the Beis Hamikdash.
Well, presupposes that the congregation can afford synagogue.
Made out of gold.
Yeah,
Correct. So every place, in order to, in with their own challenges, but even in a poor shtetl, they would have the synagogue was more beautiful, more intricate than their houses, right? If they had their houses were made of straw with thatched roofs, they tried to make that the synagogue should be taller, more beautiful, the highest place in the city, recognizable that this is a place for God. And we see this by King David. Joan, would you like to read what happened with King David? He was unsettled.
When the king had settled in his house, and God had given him rest from all his surrounding enemies, the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I am dwelling in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains within a curtain." Nathan said to the king, "Go and do all that is in your heart, for God is with you."
And that, thank you, Joan. And that was what prompted King David to begin the blueprints and the architecture for what his son would build. God did not allow King David to build the temple, but Solomon, his son, is the one who built it. So this is all where money comes from and what money is for, right? God wanted that the Jewish people should have gold in order that they should use it to build a tabernacle. However, continuing on, page 7. Wealth can become a burden.
Me?
Has anybody heard of Howard Hughes? Of course.
Of course.
So Howard Hughes died in the week before the Rebbe delivered this talk. And the Rebbe was using him as an example that riches can't buy you everything. And riches can sometimes even be the cause for the opposite of joy. So we have to make sure that we're listening to what happened before, what we said before, and that we are using our brains to use our wealth for the right things. The Rebbe, page number 7. God wants us to show that we are using our wealth in an intelligent and beneficial manner, and not, God forbid, abusing it. Unfortunately, sometimes people stumble and misuse their wealth to their own detriment. As the verse states, wealth that is kept and guarded for its owner to his own detriment. As discussed earlier, we plainly see a person who amassed vast sums of money, yet this very wealth bound and restricted him, depriving him of a normal human life. I believe at the end of his life, he had severe OCD and paranoia. He locked himself in his room. He got divorced and
Bubble.
had this habit of saving urine in jars. What was the movie about? There's a good movie about.
He went crazy.
Yeah, and he was taken care of by Mormon dependents. Yeah, he was totally done. What's the name of that movie? The Aviator.
Mhm.
Who else?
It was a very good movie.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
What are you talking about?
Howard Hughes.
Okay,
His
before that-
money, well,
before that, oh, yeah.
correct. His money remains, and you know what happened to his money, right?
Nobody-
Most of it
He didn't leave any heirs. He didn't leave any wills.
went to
Still
the
in
state,
probate.
right?
Yeah. One time he was the richest man in the world.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. His money remained sitting idly in the bank, unused, and he derived no actual benefit from it, as if it wasn't even his. The only real connection he had to his wealth was that it bred distrust of others. He lived in constant fear, always worried that maybe someone had set their sights on his money, anxious about what might happen if others discovered his identity as the famous individual. This, in addition to all the other difficulties he had in his life. It's very interesting. The Rebbe was very well informed and well aware of the goings on in the world, and used it always to tie back into
You say this was
The
the week
Torah.
after he died?
during the week. So this was in second
Yeah, it was a very
1976, 75, 76.
I remember he died. It was a very big deal. All the stories about it. He had fingernails that were like 2 feet long and
Crazy.
unshaven.
Yeah. We are told further. Don't think that this is a challenge unique to exile, something that never existed before, and therefore it cannot truly be considered a test, thus making it unreasonable to expect one to overcome it. This issue is not specifically related to exile, rather it stems from the negative inclination. The proof of this is that the first person about whom it is said wealth kept by its owner to their detriment was Korach. Let's take a minute to speak about this man Korach. Anyone heard of Korach? Korach was a cousin of Moses. He led a rebellion against Moses. He tried to make a coup. And he was the wealthiest man. In fact, till today, there's an expression in Yiddish, Reich wie Korach, which if you want to tell someone was rich, you say this guy was as rich as Korach. What ended up happening at the end of the story is that the earth opened up and swallowed him and all his men. So, on the lighter side, they say a joke. Why do we say Reich wie Korach? Why not rich as Montefiore or rich as Rothschild? Why do we say rich as Korach? Because when he died, all his books went down with him. So you don't know, who he owed and what he owed. His books were all buried together with him. Okay, but back to the real story. Korach is the first one about whom I believe it was King Solomon who said this verse: the richness which is guarded to its owners for his own detriment. This was Korach. Korach was a clever man, an intelligent Jew in all other respects. He knew Torah, and he could argue and present his case based on Jewish law. God granted him immense wealth, assuming that I don't like this word assuming, that due to his intelligence and capacity for Torah learning, he would use it properly. However, since he was given free will, his wealth ultimately became wealth kept by its owner to their detriment. So let's think about this for a second. Had Korach, the richest man, realized that his money is for giving, what would have happened? He would have given his money and he would have become one of the most influential people in the generation just because people would recognize that this is a man who gives, this is a man who loves to help. But instead, it took him the other path, and he ended up dying and going down to the grave with nothing, right? He ended up not getting anything. So
he lost the money. He lost all his money before he died.
his money got swallowed together with him. So I guess he was buried together with his money. I mean, he didn't lose it, but he died. So he instead of becoming an influential philanthropic, he could have sponsored a huge study hall or study group, study tent, whatever they used over there, and he could have been the Rosh Hashiva. He could have been the head of the. But no, he was mixed up. His money got the better of him, and he ended up going down to the grave with his money and no power and no fame. Sorry?
A lot of people want to take their money with them.
right?
joking.
So unfortunately, it ended up being a big problem. Mitch, would you like to read source number 7?
Wealth kept by, I'm sorry.
Well, you heard of Andrew Carnegie? Carnegie,
Like Carnegie Hall?
yeah,
Okay.
he was the old man was the richest world at this time.
We can't hear people.
Disgrace.
Zalman said that Mr. Carnegie, what was his
Andrew-
first name?
Andrew Carnegie.
Andrew Carnegie said, the man who dies rich dies disgraced.
Oh, wow. Good for him.
Yeah. You know what? There was this guy, he comes into New York, and he asked the cab driver, he says, how do I get to Carnegie Hall?
Right.
Practice, practice, practice.
That is like one of the oldest jokes.
I didn't
Yep.
hear the end of it. Did you say the end of it?
What is it?
He said, the cab driver told him, practice, practice, practice.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, Mitch, would you like to read for us?
You never heard that joke before, Joe?
Yes, heard it before.
Source number 7.
Yeah.
Wealth kept by its owner to their own detriment. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, this is the wealth of Korah.
Thank you. Okay, page number 8. Generally speaking, the Torah avoids speaking negatively even about an impure animal. How much more so should we refrain from speaking negatively about a person, and even more so about a Jew, and certainly about someone of distinguished lineage. Moreover, Kabbalistic sources explain Korach's soul came from and remained at an extremely elevated level. This was reflected in the fact that the sons of Korach did not die. This resulted in several psalms explicitly associated with Korach. Page number 9. Why then does the Torah relate this negative information about Korach? The reason this is related to us is that the Torah wishes to make us aware of the magnitude of this challenge. We may think to ourselves, I am an intelligent individual. I have studied Torah, and I continue to study even now. And yet, it seems logical to me that I should use my money for my personal needs, keep the rest safely stored at the bank, and only give a small portion to charity, at least relative to what I could actually give. We may argue, why should I be suspected of wrongdoing? I pray 3 times a day, I study Torah, I educate my children properly, so how could I possibly be making a miscalculation? To this the Torah responds, there was once someone greater than you in Torah scholarship, wealthier than you, and of more distinguished lineage than you. Korach possessed all these qualities, yet he still fell into the trap of wealth kept by its owner to its own detriment. Who does our money belong to? How is such a thing possible? The answer is explicitly stated in the verse itself, to its owner. Korach deceived himself into thinking that he was the true owner of his money. Once he reached that mindset, his positive inclination became a partner in the money, and his negative inclination became the other partner. With 2 equal partners, sometimes one prevails, and sometimes the other. We need to recognize that we are not the true owner of our money. Rather, we are agents of God, who chose us and entrusted us with a specific sum of money so that we should merit building and strengthening Judaism in various places and ways. When we internalize this truth, we no longer see ourselves as the owners of the wealth, but rather as God's agents. As the verse states, mine is the silver and mine is the gold, says the Lord of hosts. This does not refer to the silver and gold that are stored away in the 7th heaven. It refers to the wealth that exists in your pocket, here in the physical world, in the possession of those living in it. The true owner of it all is God. Mine is the silver and mine is the gold, says the Lord of hosts. Continuing in page number 10. Yeah, the fact that the money is in our possession is because Hashem chose us as his agents to carry out his mission, to provide for our wife, ourselves, and those around us, to give charity and perform acts of kindness, and to use the money, the gold, silver, and copper to build a sanctuary for God. When we fulfill this mission, God grants us the merit as if we were the true owners of the wealth. As the Talmudic saying goes, the wine belongs to its owner, but the thank you is given to the one who pours it. right? You give a tip to the bartender, you don't give a tip to the owner of the bar. In this case, the reward is even greater because it has been granted, we have been granted free will. So this is similar to what we learned a few weeks ago about the Torah. There's the Torah the way it's God's Torah, and then it becomes your Torah. So the money, when we view the money as God's money, and we act with it accordingly, then does it become our money. Like the famous story of the rich man, they say it about Rothschild, one of the Rothschilds, I don't know if it's true or not, but the story is the story that the king once asked him to make a reckoning of his accounts. How much money do we have? And this man came back and said a certain sum of money. And the advisor, who was the anti-Jewish advisor, says, oh, he's scamming you. He's telling you how much money. This is not how much money he has. He has much more than that.
How much money the king has, or
How much money the rich man has. And the rich man said, yes, this is the money that I have given to charity, for that is the only money which is truly mine. What I have in the bank can be gone tomorrow, but what I've given, that is truly mine. Beautiful story about the rich man of Kishinev. Good history here as well. Page 11. I think this week they did put the story in, right? Last week the story was supposed to be there, but it wasn't there. You see the story of the rich man of Kishinev?
Mhm.
Right, but
Yeah.
do you see the story, right?
Oh,
It's in the book? Okay.
Oh,
For about 150 years, thousands of Jewish families lived in hundreds of villages, towns, shtetls, kibbutzim, and crossroads in the regions of Podolia, Volnia, and Bessarabia. Some were wealthy landowners, owners of large mills, vegetable gardens, and vineyards, while others had moderate wealth, and some were poor. In 1859, non-Jewish landowners set their sights on the Jewish landowners, bringing malicious reports to Mr. Plumberg, the government minister in Odessa, and demanding that administrative laws be passed to restrict Jewish landowners. These laws would empower local authorities to act at their discretion without reason or justification against Jewish landowners. The deputy minister, the notorious Mr. Kalimov, would periodically issue special orders with various justifications, increasing the taxes on Jewish landowners. He turned a blind eye to the non-Jewish landowners, but insisted on strictly enforcing the law on the Jews. The wealthy landowners, although affected to some extent by the taxes, were able to withstand them due to their large profits. However, the middle class and the poor landowners, for whom the taxes were a heavy burden, grew poorer year by year. By 1868, that's 9 years later, right? 1850, yeah. 9 years later, many, especially in the regions of Kalarash and Bender, faced a crisis as they could no longer pay the accumulated taxes from the past 2 years. In addition to the threat of being expelled from their properties, they faced the prospect of imprisonment and heavy fines. And there was no 5-star prison back then. The Rebbe Maharash, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, who was the most active communal leader in his generation, was concerned about their situation and sought to help. When he was traveling from Marienbad, he went there for health reasons to the spas over there. When he was coming back to Lubavitch at the beginning of Elul in 1868, he passed through the city of Odessa with the intention of raising funds for them. The wealthy people of Odessa responded with generous donations. However, when he came to Kishinev, the wealthy people of Kishinev did not respond as expected.
you're talking about Jewish?
Jewish, yeah. During one of his addresses at a gathering of wealthy people in Kishinev, the Rebbe Maharash said, God created the world and all of its creatures with the secret dynamic of giving and receiving. The heavens give material blessings and the earth receives. In plants too, there are givers and receivers. Similarly, among humans, there are rich people who give and poor people who receive. The rich are meant to give and the poor to receive. And God decrees who will be the rich giver and who will be the poor receiver. But the poor person asks, it is true, Master of the world, that you created your world with the dynamic of givers and receivers. But why must I be the poor one who receives and someone else the rich one who gives? Why can't I be the rich one who gives, and someone else the poor one who is receiving? Why must I suffer the hardship of poverty so that the rich person may maintain his wealth? And this is the meaning of the verse, continued the Reb Maharash, a prayer of the poor when he is in distress. Before God, he pours out his complaint. What's his complaint? This refers to the prayer of the poor when he is in distress, questioning why he must endure the suffering of poverty so that the rich may be sustained in their wealth. After all, many are sent to the world to enrich and succeed. So why must the success and wealth of the rich come at the expense of the poor person's suffering? In other words, the poor people are complaining to God. You gave the rich people money in order that they should sustain me. Why is that fair? Why do I have to remain poor just so that the rich person can stay rich so that he can give me money? In other words, what he was telling these rich people is, your money is not yours for you. Your money is yours to share. Your money is yours to give. And if you don't, then God might listen to that poor person and make him the rich one and you the poor sufferer. This holy address opened the hearts of the wealthy people of Kishinev, who contributed substantial sums. Through the combined efforts of the wealthy of Odessa and Kishinev, the hardships of the middle class and poor landowners were alleviated, and they were provided with a new source of livelihood. Moreover, news of this speech spread throughout the country, and in every city it reached, it illuminated the path for wealthy people to understand the deeper root of God's divine providence. Every Jewish man and woman who has been blessed by God with bread and clothing should recognize the good that God has done for them and express gratitude to God by extending a helping hand to their poor brethren, each according to their ability, with a generous and loving heart.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get so caught up with what am I going to wear tomorrow? What am I going to eat tomorrow? When there are other people who might not have what to eat today. So, first of all, on the one hand, we can say, God, why should I be the poor one suffering? Please send me wealth and I will do as I am supposed to. And on the other hand, when we do have what to help with, we should reach out and lend a helping hand. Key points. In the covenant between the parts, God promised Abraham that his descendants would go into Egypt and they would leave with great wealth. At the conclusion of the Egyptian exile, God told Moses to urge the Israelites to ask the Egyptians for gold and silver so he could fulfill his promise to Abraham in full. The Rebbe asks, why did God initially promise Abraham that the Israelites would leave Egypt with wealth? After all, in the desert they had no need for money as all their needs were provided from heaven. The Rebbe explains that through the building of the Mishkan, the Israelites expressed that their priorities were clear. The most important thing, and therefore the one with the most investment and beauty, was a place of holiness and spirituality. And this is why they built it with gold, silver, and finest materials. Therefore, God commanded them to collect great wealth from Egypt so it could be used for holiness in constructing the tabernacle and bringing the divine presence into the desert. Page 13. When we ensure that our synagogue is more beautiful than our own home, we convey an educational message to our children and community. Our priority in life is spirituality and holiness. Sometimes great wealth leads its owner to a life of negativity, like wealthy Howard Hughes, who succumbed to anxiety, or like Korach, whose wealth led him to rebel against Moses, only for him to be swallowed by the earth. I really like that line from Carnegie. A man who dies rich is a man who dies disgraced. What we have is what we give, and it's so true. We must remember that money, you know any rich people that we can teach this class to? We must remember, this reminds me of a story. There was one year, was a particularly hard year, and the rabbi is talking to his wife. He says, I don't know, Pesach is coming, Passover is coming, and the poor people, they're struggling. So she says, make an appeal in the shul. So he comes back after Shabbos, after prayers, and the wife says, "No, how did it go?" He says, "Well, we're halfway there. I definitely convinced the poor people that they need more money." We must remember that money belongs to God, and it is entrusted to us to fulfill God's will in the world. Takeaway. We must evaluate our priorities when it comes to matters of holiness, such as investing in a beautiful mezuzah or handmade matzah for the Seder, alongside investment in synagogues and Jewish institutions. We must remember that the money we have is given to us by God, and it is primarily intended for spiritual purposes. We should dedicate it with the utmost importance for these purposes, rather than focusing on less important personal needs. And before we watch the regular video, I have a beautiful clip, which I want to share. Thank you, everyone. John and Susie, God willing, we will see you on Tuesday morning.
Okay, Rabbi, have a nice week.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, be well, everyone.
Okay.
Everyone and your
Oh,
family.
and John and Susie, tomorrow morning, Nachama is doing a Torah and tea. I believe she's sending a message out about it today.
Okay.
Okay.
For
Take
real
good care.
or online? Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, she'll have it on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Did Major Pro